Good afternoon and welcome to episode 35 of the Jacksonian. As I am yours truly, Jackson Johnson, and I have with me is the host of Locked On Jaguars, the one and only himself, Tony Wiggins.
All
As
right,
we'll
man.
be going over our take on what's going on with the Jaguars going into 2024, what went right and what went wrong in 2023. And what's the contract status of Trevor Lawrence amongst the topics? And let me tell you something, folks. It's going to be a wild ride. How you doing today, Tony?
I'm doing good, man. I'm glad to be able to join you. You know, I get requests a lot, and sometimes I can do it, and sometimes I can't. But you and I, we were able to get this worked out, man. And I appreciate you for joining, having me join you with your listening audience and talking about everybody's favorite team here on the First Coast.
Well, thank you for taking time out of your day. I know you're a busy man, and I appreciate very much. And, for those who are just tuning in to this episode, the Jacksonian, would you like to tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Grew up in Jacksonville. Had a second home up in D.C. I was a fan of the Washington franchise forever, but always wanted Jacksonville to get a team. And when they did, after my military service, or actually kind of right at the end of it, I decided I was going to move back to Jacksonville and be a part of it, and got into some media work along with the fact that I also have another career. I've been a barber for about 32 years and started doing media work as a second gig, and got my first radio gig in 2000 called College Football Today, and I've been doing it since then, and days on terrestrial radio. Did 5 years on midday radio on the flagship station of the Jaguars, and then went independent and started doing podcasts. And I've been with Locked On now for 5 years. I just celebrated my 5th year anniversary, and credential member of the media for the last 10 years, and have a good time doing it, man. So, they say when you enjoy what you do, you'll never work another day in your life. And I'm blessed to be able to feel that way.
I know that's true. I mean, when you do something you love for a living, you're gonna enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to go over a little bit about what went right and what went wrong for the Jaguars in 2023. Because I mean, I looked at the way they started the season; they were 8-3, but then Monday Night Football happened against the Bengals.
Mm-hmm.
Trevor Lawrence was getting hurt, but little did we know it was just the beginning. The Jaguars basically ended the season at 1-5. What went wrong exactly?
Yeah, so I don't think what went wrong started at that loss. So let me clarify that. To start the season, are you vaping? And look at you, man. You okay? That's a pen. I was like, I know you ain't vaping and getting buzzed up while we doing the show, man. I'm like, whoo, that's some good stuff. I'm just joking with you, but no,
It's okay.
Uh,
We have fun around here at the
I know it. I know
Jacksonian.
it. Their problem started before that, but there was two ways to look at it. The Jaguars are 8-3, but they weren't playing like an 8-3 football team. But sometimes what happens in the NFL or in football, period, good teams can kind of get away with playing poorly but still win games. So there was just this optimism that what was going to happen is the switch was going to get hit, or the optimistic approach that you take is, you always try to look at everything with a grain of salt and extract the good part of it. So the good part of it is the bad part is we know that's not sustainable, but the good part is we're winning. So guess what? When it flips, they won't be 3-8 or 2-7 like they were the year before when it flipped and they started playing well and then barely get into the playoffs. The thing is okay, once this thing flips around, they're going to win 12 games. And now they're actually playing better. Good teams will do that to you. Good teams will make you believe that what you're seeing ain't real because the result says win. And that's all people talk about is winning, winning, winning. But the part of you that wants to see them get to a point and start playing well enough to actually win it, you never saw that from them. So Doug Peterson, even at the end of the season, said we were all sitting around and the players, everybody's kind of like waiting for the switch to hit. Now, I think that's what went wrong with the team because it showed up. And the part of the team that I believe was the biggest problem was their ability to beat people on the offensive line. They struggled in short yardage. They constantly had to go for it every time they went over the 50-yard line because points were hard to come by in the red zone. So they had to score almost every single time that they could. But when you don't convert those, that gives the field position up a lot. So the thing that happened with the Jaguars is they got exposed by San Francisco first. And then Trevor, when it looked like they were going to still be able, because once you realize that you can't block people and your offensive line isn't very good, you just got to get to the offseason. There's no way you're going to fix that during the year. So they decided that they figured out a way to get the ball out of his hand quick, get the ball out to your playmakers, and they were figuring out ways to try to win games. And then Trevor got hurt, and then they couldn't do that anymore. He got hurt on Monday night against the Bengals, as you said. He got hurt. He was actually injured before the leg injury. He was buzzed up top, but he didn't tell anybody because he's a competitor and he wanted to play. That's when everything unraveled, and they just couldn't overcome that. Towards the end of the year, he started fumbling the ball a little bit more, started pressing a little bit more, and then they looked like a very, very desperate team. But they were still a game of victory against the Titans in the last week of the season. They were still a victory away from making the playoffs. But in hindsight, it's probably good that they didn't, because you might not have learned a lesson that you needed to learn. And I think they learned it, because now I see in the offseason, they did things a whole lot different.
Well, you definitely learn a lot more from losing than you do for winning. That's for sure.
Yeah, no doubt.
But, going into 2024, what are the strengths that we're looking at and the weaknesses that we're going to be looking at?
I talked today about leadership. I do think that they are not taking that for granted anymore. They went out and added some really good leaders in the offseason. And, they can be taken two ways. They could be saying, well, if you got to go out and shop for leadership is something that should be homegrown. I think they have homegrown leaders, but I think what they did was go out and add to them and get like-minded players like Eric Armstead and Mitch Morse to go along with the guys that they already have. And those guys have a little bit more playoff experience than the guys at Jacksonville. I think it's more of a not replacing the leadership as much as it is having those guys come in and says, you guys are doing a fabulous job, and this is how I'm going to show you how to broaden that a little bit. And they're going to be expecting people to get better. I also think they addressed some things that had been lacking a little bit. Last year during the offseason, they wanted to just build on the momentum that they had, and I think they lost a golden opportunity to really add competition and continue to add that friction. I believe they were trying to protect the integrity of their unity and protect their locker room and all of that stuff. But I do think there's a fine line between doing that and becoming complacent. And I think they missed the mark a little bit. They have to trust themselves to be able to go out and get this kind of people that's going to come in and ingratiate themselves into the lineup. And I think that's what they did this offseason. The Jaguars approached this offseason as if we are never taking anything for granted again, because we just don't have time to do that.
Well, I will say, though, I'm curious to see what 2024 is going to look like for the Jaguars. So what I've got here is the 2024 schedule. And we're going to see them start out with the Dolphins. It's a shame they don't play each other annually. I kind of want to see in-state teams play each other every year. Feels weird that they don't.
Yeah,
then
it is.
you got
It is a little strange that they don't see them often. Let me talk about that Dolphins game. That's a big one early. And the reason why is because there's an element of the Jaguars that's going to be tested really, really fast. Because the one thing so the Jaguars have a new scheme with defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen, who I think is a home run hire. And I don't know if I mentioned it yet, but I think that's one of the things to look forward to. I think he'll do a better job of matching what they have personnel wise with their scheme, which inevitably will give you a better result on that side of the ball, more cohesion and understanding of what they're going to look like from a week-to-week basis. That being said, the first game of the year in South Florida in the heat against the fastest team in the league, against the team that you can basically shut out all game and they can make 3 plays and beat you. That's going to be a tough assignment. But if they go out early and get that done quickly, then the sky's going to be the limit for them.
Well, and I noticed that the Browns and the Bills and Texans are on there for the rest of September. And I got to be honest, that September slate looks a little bit tough.
It does. You're talking about quarterback play. I mean, we have to see what Deshaun Watson is able to do, but Cleveland has a very, very complete team, a very good defense, a lot of weapons on offense. Maybe they get Nick Chubb back, even if they don't. But it's all going to be about, if I remember Deshaun Watson, his very last game was the best game he played in Cleveland. So we're thinking that between that, Tua, going up to Buffalo and going against the other Josh Allen, and of course CJ Stroud, who told everybody how good he is all off season. But 3 of those games being on the road against those types of playoff teams, and I don't even want to sit here and look past the 5th game, which is the Colts, because they split with the Jaguars last year, and they have their young quarterback. So big time critical stuff early on for this team. We're going to have a chance to see exactly what they're made of.
Hmm. Well, and we're going to see what the Bears are going to be made of going into October 13th in London, England. And the Patriots, they're not quite where they were from the Bill Belichick, Tom Brady era, but they're in a new era all the same.
Mm-hmm.
I got to admit, it feels weird talking about the Patriots being in a new era because, I mean, my whole life has been Bill Belichick as head coach.
Mm.
Now it's like, wow, this is really sinking in. They got a new head coach.
Yeah, man, for sure.
But the Jordan Love Trevor Lawrence shootout, that looks like a fun matchup.
It does, because I expect both of them to get contract extensions. And I know, based on the information you see, we're going to hit that in a little bit. I think they're going to be the guys that are side by side in these new contract negotiations. And I think the way both teams are talking, that both teams expect to have a deal done. We're going to see who's going to live up to it. And by that time, you might have your answer anyway a little bit, but that's a very, very good game.
Oh, yeah. Eagles are going to be tough because they got that offense. You mess with them, they'll chew you up like a chicken nugget.
Mm-hmm. We saw that. We saw it a couple of years ago. We went to Philly in the rain. Jags jumped all over them, and they slowly but surely ran the ball down the Jaguars' throat. And the Jaguars weren't able to keep up with them, and eventually Philly won that game. So that's the kind of toughness that I'm talking about. That toughness and leadership, that play in the trenches. Philly can either exploit it or they can be the canvas where you can actually draw a picture and show the world we've arrived because we did that to them.
Oh, yeah, and now that they got Saquon Barkley, it's gonna be even scarier. So it's like, I don't wanna get on your bad side, Saquon. He's the big valley. That's what I call him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he can definitely light it up and play. I see the Minnesota game. Minnesota, New England, those are games with young quarterbacks. The Jaguars got to win those. At this stage in the development of those teams, those are games that you got to win, but they're not easy. And then, of course, the Detroit game. Another game between the Jaguars and another team that 2 or 3 years ago, they were side by side. And I think at first it looked like the Jags had a little bit of an advantage because they made the playoffs in a tougher conference. But now Detroit, with them getting to the championship game last year, being ahead and probably should have been able to win it, now they've kind of taken a little bit of a leap ahead. And then everybody's going to always compare Aiden Hutchinson and Trayvon Walker for the rest of their career. So very, very interesting.
And the Lions, they're nowhere near like they were in like 08, for example. They're now a contender.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Although they probably play, I just can't wait to be king before each game.
That's the way they are, and that's how they're built, man. Houston, Tennessee, we get those division games rolling back around. The Jets, I don't know what they're going to be. I'm interested to see it, but that's another game that they have to win. At the point where the Jaguars in December, 3 days before Christmas, when they go out to Vegas, that just feels like a game like, oh my God, if they don't have it all together, if they're not mentally prepared and right, and with the way Antonio Pierce coaches, which is very similar to Dan Campbell in Detroit, if you come out there half-stepping on a team like that, they'll physically beat you, even if they're not as talented.
Yeah, I'm not messing with the Raiders anytime soon because yeah, they're gonna be more motivated under Coach Pierce. Because I mean, I remember watching a little bit of them under McDaniels, and my God, it was horrible. It was just terrible. When McDaniels asked Pierce to give the players a motivating story, and he told them about, hey, nobody thought the Giants could beat the Patriots, but here we are. We did it. We accomplished the impossible. But then McDaniels had a little private one-on-one session saying, "Don't you ever say that about the Patriots again." I'm like, bruh,
you ain't there no more, brother. Yeah, man, that's just wow.
Ugh. But and when Pierce was the interim head coach, every time they won a game, even if it was just a little game, players were smoking cigars, all happy, and they were playing the Peanuts music. They were playing all kinds of music.
That's
Didn't
what
see
happened.
that with McDaniels.
Nope. That's why coaching matters, brother.
Exactly. And it's like you said, leadership matters too.
Sure does.
And
They end the season right there with those two division games. Hopefully, for the first time in 3 years, one of those games won't be a must win for them to get into the playoffs, but it could be the way that this season is, the way it sets up. One of those games could be win or get in, or win and you're either a number 2 seed or you're a number 7 seed. I think those games are going to really, really matter down the stretch.
yeah, the AFC South is going to be very interesting to see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I know I kind of feel like on the one hand it's Jaguars and Texans killing
Yeah.
each other for the top seed in the division,
Mm-hmm.
but on the other hand, the Titans and Colts are looking to have some say so.
Well, think about it like this. It came down to a 4th down incompletion for the Texans to even be the team, because if the Texans had lost and the Jaguars lost to the Titans, the Colts would have been in the playoffs. So the Colts aren't as far behind as people think. And then with the Titans, well, if the Jags beat them, they're in the playoffs, and they lost to them too. So you can't discount any team in the AFC South. They all have young quarterbacks. New coaching situation that a lot of people would think will improve the offense of Tennessee. The Texans are where the Jaguars were last year. It's like, okay, let us see. And I don't think they let off. They went out and got Daniil Hunter and all of these guys and traded for Stephon Diggs. And if you think about the way their coach is yoked, I don't think they're going to be, complacent. But then with the Colts were way better than people thought, and they were unhealthy. So now it's like, this division that I used to call the equivalent to the Mountain West back in the day, I said it was the Mountain West of the NFL. That is not true. They are not bottom dwellers. I think the AFC South is probably the worst division. But this division doesn't take too much of a backseat to anybody. The AFC South, maybe the NFC East, and even then, they're not bad because they had 2 playoff teams last year. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see exactly how the Jaguars respond, because now they're not the up and coming team anymore that people can look past. You got to. The old saying is, "Ain't no fun when the rabbits got the gun." So now other teams will know exactly who they are and what they are. And now they got to just know who they are. The Jaguars have to believe in themselves and make sure that they put up a concentrated effort that is consistent from a weekly basis, and that's not what they've done over the last 2 seasons so far. And they still were 9-8. If they just get the consistency down and get a little bit better in the trenches, I think they could really hang around being an 11-12 win team for the foreseeable future.
Well, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens in 2024. Speaking of which, got that draft class. You got the other
man.
Jordan Jefferson, but he's not a receiver. He's on defense. That's the funny part too.
I know it, right? The draft, I believe, was very, very good. And normally people, when they talk about Trent Baalke, they talk about his over dependency on certain traits. This time, I think going for traits and going for need and going for actual talent that can play, I think it all matched up, because the positions where they wanted to really address, that they addressed: the interior of the defensive line, the wide receiver position, additional bodies, young bodies on the offensive line, and then playmakers that can actually help in special teams, but also that can line up and be really, really specific. Brian Thomas he's a big, long, tall receiver who has excellent speed and can high point the ball. Mason Smith, big former 5-star recruit, who probably the only reason he wasn't the top 15 pick is because 2 years ago he had a devastating knee injury, but all 6'5", 305 pounds. And his former defensive coordinator is a defensive line or linebacker coach with the Jaguars right now. He's going to help on the defense. Jarian Jones got healthy after having some injuries at FSU, and is a lengthy, tough-minded corner. And to go opposite of Tyson Campbell, Javon Foster, SEC offensive tackle, who's 24 years old and very mature, has a lot of versatility. You mentioned Jordan Jefferson, another big 315-pounder in the middle. And then you look at DeAndre Prince, who's built just like Jarian Jones, who can play. Keelan Robinson is fast, maybe the fastest player on the team. Come back and you might have your starting kicker in Cam Little. And then Miles Cole, for me, was a dude I liked in the draft, but he's a little raw. but he fits the bill as a dude that's almost 6'6" and 280 pounds that has length. And he's the type of player that has those traits that Trent Baalke can really, really work with and give the Jaguars a nice little future. But the beauty in this is they don't have to rush those guys. Like in the past, they expected guys to come in and be instant contributors. Now the door is open for them to do that, my brother. I'm not saying that they won't have an opportunity to play, but it's not a necessity, because if you find it too much of a necessity to play too many young people, then they're going to eventually play like young people, and you're going to have the immaturity on the field. Now they can bring them along at the pace that they need to and develop them for the future. I think depth is good, whether it's experience or talent. And in this case, these young guys will represent talented depth that don't have experience, but you won't have to make them experience that until they're ready.
Well, I'm excited to see them in their first game, that's for sure. And I wanted to go over a little bit about that contract status. Now, I know Trevor got that 5th-year option, but how much are we looking at for that contract extension?
I don't know what the number will be. There's a real number, and then there's the actual number. The actual number, and then the one that's going to be floated out there. I don't think he's going to reset the market. I think if he had played a little bit better, he could, or if the team had a little bit more success, he probably would be able to reset the market. But I do think he'll fall in line with those guys. He'll be around where Jalen Hurts is. I don't think that's too much to ask to pay him that type of bread to put him in that position. I don't think he's going to get what Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson got, but I think it'll be right behind that. I think him and Jordan Love will both get re-signed, and it's pretty much a technicality right now. It is going to be done. I think it will be done. It'll get done before training camp. The Jacksonville Jaguars are committed to Trevor Lawrence, and I don't see anything derailing him from being the quarterback of this team for the next 6 or 7 years.
It's going to be very exciting seeing some of these quarterback matchups over the next half decade. I'm
Sure will.
looking for. I feel like a kid at a candy store.
Sure will.
But I've always told people that one of the jobs with longest job security is being the Packers quarterback.
Oh, yeah, of course. They only swap them out once every 12 years, it seemed like. So that's a good thing. But hopefully the Jaguars don't have to worry about swapping out anybody, and we'll put a statue up of Trevor Lawrence 15 years from now.
There you go. That's the way the news goes. And as we wrap up episode 35 of the Jacksonian, for those who would like to talk with you about the Jaguars or about your career and
Man,
whatnot.
I answer people. My X page is, I slapbox with you a little bit now, because I do that because I kind of want people to. We have 140 characters. We have to be able to communicate better. It's hard sometimes, with the characters that we have, to be able to express our points. All I ask is just you be real, be honest. Don't put words in my mouth, and don't assume anything. Ain't nothing wrong with asking a question on X, but you can check me out on X. My Instagram page is a little bit of a family page, and every now and then my hair cutting page. So I don't dive into that too much. But you can also, for all Jaguars related stuff without my personal life, is Locked On Jaguars. The Locked On Jaguars page on X as well as on YouTube. Make sure you like on YouTube on Locked On Jaguars. Our motto is, it's your team every day. We always thank people for making us your first listen and being an everydayer. Make sure you pop in and hit that. And we're 5 days a week, year round. So it's 30 minutes a day, approximately 30 minutes, between 27 and 31 minutes. So it's like a little quick radio show every single day, and we'll hit the topics of the day and sometimes some of those bigger things. But that's where you can find me, man. And football can't get here fast enough. I'm so tired of talking about women's basketball on my regular page to people, but because that argument is going left and right. But I'll tell you what, one thing we all have in common: we want the Jaguars to be good, and we're tied to optimism. Everything that we talk about is all about the optimism. But one thing I won't do, I won't be optimistic and lie to you. I'll tell you the truth and make you mad at me before I'll sell you the wolf tickets just to keep you comfortable.
Well, they often say that the truth hurts, but lies hurt in the long term.
No doubt.
They make you feel good, but they hurt in the long term.
That's right.
Truth will make you hurt in the short term, but it'll make you better in the long term.
You got it. You got it. It will, man. And thank you once again for reaching out to me and
Oh,
having
you're
me on your show,
welcome.
on your platform with your listeners. And I am very, very grateful for you to take the time and ask me. And you said the one and only, man. I'm just as humble as I can be, man. I just believe I'm just a dude who grew up on the west side of Jacksonville that's just trying to just talk some ball, man. So thank you once again for having me, and blessings to you and all of your audience.
I'll thank you for coming on. And I think when there's a next time I have you on, I'll have to make sure we'll talk a little bit more about your career, at, Locked On Jaguars and, how you became a barber, that's pretty
Oh,
cool,
yeah.
man.
Oh, yeah. We'll get into it, man, all day.
Because, the Jacksonian is not only a football show, but it's an everybody show.
That's right.
So that is for sure. And as for me, you can find me right here on YouTube at Jackson Johnson 979, where I'm getting close to 500 subs each and every day. You can find me on Nets at Jackson09960335. You can find me on Instagram and Threads at Jackson Johnson 543-908, where I give my updates on who's coming on the Jacksonian, and I just kind of run my mouth about what's going on in my take of the world. And for all of you, have a wonderful afternoon. Stay safe, stay cool, stay away from that heat, and put some sunglasses on.